Thanks for having me. Thanks, man. So I've been given a really tough task today, which is to cover subject matter that I really love in a very short period of time. I'm a bit of a strange anomaly in that I have a professional career, an academic career, also a martial artist, and I'm a self-acknowledged risk nerd. I love everything to do with risk. So starting this off, I think one of the foundational pieces we've got to get our heads around is the world we're in today is not the world we were in even yesterday. Things are changing so quickly and so dynamically. We need to understand, how do we fit? What do we do? How do we not just survive, but how do we thrive? So to kick this off, and I know a lot of you have dialed in, so you're not going to be able to scream at me, but you can visualize in your own minds as we go through some of this. Do me a favor, those in the room. What's the first word or the first thought that pops into your head when you hear the word risk? Okay, and I totally get it. I'm in a room of risk people. So who wants to go first? Scream. Yeah. Danger. Yeah, what else? Opportunity. Thank you for a little bit of balance there. Anybody else got something different? Change. Nice. Uncertainty. Okay, keep going. Yeah. Job. Fair enough. So it's personal for you. I get it. I like that a lot. Okay. Let's do the same thing with the term customer. Okay, so what pops into your head? Yeah. Serve. Expectation. Anybody else? You were screaming at me more vigorously with risk. Satisfaction. Outcomes. Purpose. Okay. Hey, if we're not making money, it's really hard to service the customer, right? It's not a bad thing. And even within my own business, one of the terms I like to drive across my people is make a dollar, make a difference. It doesn't have to be one or the other. How do we enable ourselves to do both? So I like that a lot. You need to be linking these things. Okay, and the topic of leadership has come up probably, I was counting, if we were playing leadership bingo, probably about 25 times already this morning. So clearly that's a theme that everybody needs to understand and feel comfortable with. So what pops into your head when you hear the term leadership?
Enabler.
Say again?
Enabler.
Enabler. Nice. Direction. Who said direction? Old school management. Like it. All right. Anyone else? Visionary. Nice. Okay. So here's the quick moral of the story. If I asked you to give me the technical definitions of each of those words, you probably would have sat there for a while. Some of you wanted to jump on Google. You might have been going, Merriam-Webster dictionary, which dictionary do I use? The challenge is it actually doesn't matter what the technical term means. It's what it means to us at a given time. And this is a real challenge when we look at servicing a broad range of stakeholders in a very fast-changing world. It's not as simple as it used to be. And if we flash back just 20 years ago, 20 years ago, things moved slower. I remember I actually started my career as a professional bodyguard back in South Africa a while ago. And for us, it was a major innovation when we got pagers, because we could lifetime now be connected. But imagine the challenge of protecting somebody, getting the page, having to figure out a safe place to leave the person you were protecting while you went to find a landline or a phone box to call into the office. I tried to explain this to my kids the other day. They just started laughing at me. Okay, they're 10 and 11 years old. So the world has changed very fast. Post-COVID, there's been significant changes that we haven't even been able to recognize yet. We actually haven't had a full recovery post-COVID yet. What we've done is we've gone, oh, that wasn't fun. Let's not do that again. Let's get back to work. And we've got all these challenges we're trying to work through. So the biggest challenge we've got at the moment is understanding the world we're in now versus the world we think we're in. There are lots of ways to explain this. Originally, I taught a postgraduate program in the psychology of risk for almost a decade. And one of the challenges we had was we're all risk people, how do we get the context right? Because we all know if we don't have the context aligned, the outcomes are never what they need to be. And I came across this term VUCA, which the US Army War College penned in the late 1980s as a way to describe what their intelligence analysts felt was a big challenge post the end of the Cold War. And really, they found that the second they stopped penning and researching and gave somebody product to make a decision off, they felt it wasn't valid anymore. Because things were moving so quickly back then. Now fast forward, we added the D into VUCA because there's very little we're doing now that doesn't have a digital overlay, digital footprint, or digital interaction capability requirement. So let's just talk about these things quickly. Volatile. Stuff changes very quickly, right? We've seen that. Okay? The fact that we are hyper-connected, you have access to the world's knowledge in your pocket. Okay? I just finished a whirlwind trip through the US. I spent 2 weeks in about 8 different cities and 2 conferences and speaking. And it's fascinating because you switch on one news channel and you get given this information, and you switch on that news channel and you get given the same information from a totally different perspective. And then you find one somewhere in the middle and you try and make sense of that. That's the news, right? It's supposed to be based on facts to enable us to make good decisions, right? It's harder than it's ever been. So if we start looking at things like volatility, how quickly things change, we can't look at that without going, ambiguity is a big challenge. Misinformation, disinformation, malinformation now, where people are actively trying to implant false information to create negative outcomes. It's not so simple. Uncertainty is not new, right? If we all could predict the future with a very strong level of certainty, the field of risk management wouldn't exist, right? We're here because we need to help people manage uncertainty. And it's not an easy thing to do. It makes people feel very uncomfortable. That's one of the things that makes risk-type people a little bit different. We want to understand uncertainty, we want to try and quantify why, and we want to try and forecast likely outcomes. It's probably what makes you weird to most other people when you try and talk about risk as though it's exciting. Right, at least that's what happens to me with my family. But it is important for us to remember that we are translators. We collect information, we package information, we put meaning behind information, we share that information so that great decisions can be made. And ultimately, when we want to pin risk down, it's our ability to wrangle these things, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and digitization, to enable good outcomes that makes a difference. I want to spend just a minute on complexity, and then we'll move to the next piece. Anybody here familiar with, studied, or had a look at something that would fit into the category of systems thinking or complex adaptive systems thinking? Anybody spend some time in the world of systems? Come on, don't be shy. I'm not going to pick on you. If you haven't, you should, right? Because if we don't understand the systems we're in, we can't control them. And the whole idea of running a high-performing business is to understand what we control and what we don't. You're not alone. It was really interesting to listen to Bridget Drill. I'm not sure what the right description would be there with Michael. But the challenge we fundamentally got at the moment is that it's really, really difficult to take lots of complexity and make it simple. So realistically, if we look at where we started in the first industrial revolution, we got really good at building simple systems. The second and third industrial revolution enabled us to build complicated systems. And if you think of the hyper-specializations, even within our own fields, think about the differences in the way a credit risk team would work from the way a consumer credit risk team might work, which might be different from the way an internal controls team might work, which might be different from the way a foresight or strategic risk team might work. They're actually different skill sets all within the same family. We've made our world incredibly complex because of the way we've evolved hyper-specialization across our different domains. So the challenge we've got is most of our systems, and any organization that's older than 30 years falls into this category, because if you predated the internet age, it's always had to be a retrofit. We've always had to figure out what to do. In fact, the comment that was made about automating controls, if you start from the beginning now, you tend to buy solutions that are already automated. If you're trying to undo something that's been in place for 30 or 40 years and probably works if it's been in place that long, it's incredibly difficult to go, well, let's just pull that out and plug something else in. It's not a simple thing to do. So the world of complicated and the world of simple have two big things in common. They have a high degree of certainty and a high degree of control. I'd like to ask you an honest question. How many of you feel you have a high degree of certainty and a high degree of control in everything you do every day? Who feels they do have a very high degree of certainty or control? Okay, a little bit? Okay, there we go. Thank you for the honesty, Amy. But that's honesty, right? Because the challenge we've got now is actually as we shift out of simple and complicated operating systems, we move into two other states of operating, complexity and chaos. The difference between complexity and chaos is control and certainty. One of the things I'd love you to keep in mind as we move forward with this stuff, I like the term risk theater. It's where we pretend we're managing risk. Okay? It makes us feel good, just like we're watching a show, right? It entertains us. It's also often defensible at a first glance because, hey, I did something. But pretending to do something doesn't solve a problem. Pretending to do something doesn't move us forward. It just creates a perception we're moving forward. And I see part of the challenge, you are not alone. I see part of this challenge across most large multinationals that are older than 30 years is we have to actually be able to separate what is theater and what works. What are the outcomes? And it's incredibly difficult in complexity because these things are interwoven. You pull one lever and it messes up 50 others. You take one piece out and there's 30 other unintended consequences. So it isn't simple and we need to own that. Yeah, so what does this mean for us? VUCAD means several things. One, you need to develop what I like to call ambidextrous capability. You can't just be a manager anymore. And I was listening to Michael about some of the earlier managers he worked with who tended to direct and not roll up their sleeves. Okay, that sort of behavior is wonderful when we have high degrees of control, high degrees of certainty. Yeah, one of the terms that I found thrown at me a lot by different audiences, so I'm like, how's everything going? It doesn't matter what sector, because I speak to so many different sectors. Generally, the feedback I'll get is, we're under pressure. We've got to do more with less, and we've got to do more with less quicker. Okay, I'm sure you probably can relate to that, right? How do we do more with less quicker? Everyone goes, let's get more efficient. What does that even mean? Yeah, let's disrupt the system, right? Anybody who's ever studied disruptive innovation knows it's incredibly difficult to disrupt yourself. Okay, in fact, the organism, and you are an organism, as a working group, will fight against that. So I wanted to share some ideas with you as we move forward. In my business now, it's kind of funny, VUCAD has become a verb, and people will often go, I got VUCAD today, right? However you want to use it, that's fine, but we have to think differently. We cannot be stuck in a mindset that goes control equals outcome, and every 6 months I inspect the effectiveness of that control and make sure it's giving me the outcome. Okay, that implies a high degree of control, high degree of certainty, and often we're lying to ourselves about those things. We have to be more dynamic. We have to be ambidextrous. You have to be able to manage, in other words, use those skills that direct and drive the correct behaviors for the parts of business where you do have a high degree of control and certainty, because we do have some. And then we have to have adaptive leadership, the ability to lead even if you are not the leader. If nobody else is around, who's making decisions? And the longer we take, the more we slow things down, the more we create more ambiguity, and often the worse the result. So listening to the interview with Michael, the idea of purpose is really strong, but it's not enough just to go, I'm purpose-driven. Right? So what? What does that mean? How do you manifest it? What do you do that enables that purpose to actually mean something? And I'd like you to think, if possible, on a few different levels. To be performing at an adequate, not a high performing, at an adequate level in the world we're in today, I need to firstly be able to control myself. Okay? Control what comes out of my mouth, control my actions, control my thoughts. Then ideally, I'd like to try and understand others. Okay? And work with them collaboratively and make sure we can work together. But what's the point of me trying to drive, guide, and steer others if I can't do it for me? Okay? And then the next piece is the organization. So historically, the organization worked out what it needs, and it tells you how to fit into what it needs. When things move quickly in a VUCAD world, it has to be a marriage. It has to actually work both ways. You have to constantly adapt by seeing what the organization and the team needs. At the same time, the organization also has to adapt, which is incredibly difficult to do because, honestly, what is any business? It's a collection of people, okay, who are brought together to achieve something. The more structured and the more integrated, the more we can align the why, what, and how, the better the outcome. But think about it from your own perspective. If you are really not motivated by the work you do, are you bringing that best version of you to work? Are you going to make great decisions? Okay, are you going to inspire those around you? The answer is probably no if you don't like what you do. So I always say to my staff, I think it's a 60-40 split at minimum. If 60% of what you do you hate, find another job, do something different. Life is too short to be in an environment where the majority of what you do crushes your will to live. Okay? Honestly. Okay? But realistically, the fact that you're sitting in a room laughing about risk means you're probably in the right place in the right job. Because we actually need to change the way we do things. When I started my career in risk management nearly 25 years ago, it was all about stopping bad stuff. That was it. Okay, the whole idea of risk was a negatively based idea, and the whole concept was stop things happening, prevent bad stuff happening. Now we've seen the best companies in the world are ones that take the right risks, that balance the way they take risk. It's not all about negative downside management. It's about managing downside while we grab upside. It's a bit different. So we've got to think differently. We've actually got to build the skill set I like to call risk intelligence. RIQ. Not just your IQ, not just your EQ. Okay? Those are probably what got you hired. They're the ability to have a skill set and hopefully get along with others. They're what enables organizations and individuals to thrive is making great decisions. Okay, so I like to look at this as a living skill, which means it changes all the time. I can't only be risk intelligent for this and then make terrible decisions here. It's also an applied attribute. I don't theoretically make good decisions. You either do or you don't. And simply, we want to enable upside opportunity while we manage negative outcomes. It's not an ambiguous piece. The challenge we've got is in the modern world, things change quickly. We've just discussed VUCAD, right? So I need to have agility. I need to be able to change angle. I need to be able to pivot. Humans suck at that, right? We're actually not good at this. In fact, we are wired for homeostasis. We want to create a structure where we are balanced and feel safe. And when we get there, I'm sure you've worked with people like this. They complain about their jobs all the time. And then you go, well, why don't you leave? And they go, oh, but I know what happens here. I'm kind of comfortable. I like my boss. And they'll come up with a reason to stay, even though they've given you 50 to go. The challenge we've got with this stuff is it's not just about resilience. It's about applying agility and resilience together to get great outcomes, to be more risk intelligent, to be able to pivot, change angle at the right time. And I guess if you've got your chief financial officer echoing your CEO sentiments saying they want you to think about doing things simpler, they want situational leadership. Okay? And if you do the research, which I've done, the best innovations come from the front line. They come from people who are out there dealing with the challenges all the time. They very rarely come from an external consultant who comes in and looks, and they very rarely come from the people who are driving or running the functions. Okay, so if we want to have better outcomes, we've got to think differently. Right? And ideally, what we want to do, there was a whole field of study in the late 1970s that started around high reliability organizations, HROs. If you aren't reliable today, you shouldn't even be in business. Right? We actually have to be high performing. We have to move from reliability to high performance. Okay? That also requires honesty. We have to look at what's working and what's not working, own what's not working, figure out what's important to fix, what's not. And I see this all the time across our consulting practice. We'll end up with clients who've got these incredibly robust and mature risk processes that literally nobody but the risk people understand. Yeah, we've got a big federal government client that brought us in to do a bit of work not long ago. They had written a 2,500-page manual for the organization to use around environmental risk. I won't say who now. And then they were all upset that nobody reads the manual. It's not a surprise. And these are the smartest people in the room. So how do we get there? We want to start thinking about things like not just high reliability, but high performance. And we want that customer-centric. Right? If you can't keep the people who enable funds to roll into your business happy, well, guess what happens? We have a negative cascading piece. You're risk people, you can work that out. So how do we do it? As I started researching risk and resilience years ago, I found a few problems. And the biggest problem was the way we think about risk. Right? Most of us were trained to think about risk with a compliance mindset. Right? But it's not really enough now because risks get realized. Or we've got that little sneaky thing called residual risk, that even if you do a really great job at minimizing the likelihood of the outcome or the negative consequence, it might still happen. Why? Because we're predicting the future in an environment we don't have full control. Yeah, so we've seen a nice shift into the world of compliance and resilience starting to intersect. We see that in financial services with new APRA regulations rolling in around operational risk. Shouldn't scare you, should make your business better, honestly. Thinking about what could go wrong and how I can, in advance, make sure the critical pieces that keep me going are intact is just good thinking. Right? Coming up with processes, policies, and procedures to tick a compliance box kind of waste your time if you're only doing it to tick the box instead of achieve a better outcome. So why resilience? If compliance and resilience make a ton of sense, why a new concept? So I think the easiest way to do it is to think about it like this. Compliance is the stuff you have to do. financial services and banking in particular is one of the most regulated sectors anywhere in the world, particularly in a first world country like Australia. We know that you can't move away from that. It is the stuff you have to do. How do you do it quicker, more efficiently to the regulator's requirements, and how can you make it add value? It's not an ambiguous piece, but if you get caught in compliance as the driver, you're set for disruption. Because compliance is a minimum standard that is backwards looking. We want to be forwards looking. Not easy to do. We also know residual risk and things will go wrong, so I want to have enough resilience in me, in my team, in our system, in our structures, that if something goes wrong, we can keep going. Okay, so that's not difficult to say, but to do is quite a challenge. It goes against most lean ideals, because the lean ideal is let's only have the bare minimum. Let's get it as lean as we can so there's no wastage. We're highly efficient. But actually, resilience goes against that. Resilience is, have I got enough reserve just in case something goes wrong? So it often can create a bit of cognitive dissonance. So when we started looking at what was missing, the first challenge is you never really get celebrated for making sure bad stuff doesn't happen. But proactive prevention is really the primary driver of where we should play. We've got to change the way we model our stuff, and we've got to think about it a bit differently. Right? And equally, we'd like to have a bit of opportunity centrism rolled in. So I'd like you to think of these three things like a three-legged stool. When I get them right, high performance comes. How many of you, if you look at that, and I'm conscious I only have a few minutes left, when you look up at that, how many of you play more than one role? How many of you are a player, a coach, a referee, sometimes you're a spectator? Anyone got kids? Right, you don't always have to think about your work role, right? We're swapping between these things all the time. It's really important to be high performing to know which role to wear, when to be in which position. The challenge we've got is when we understand a bit of human psychology, once somebody has put you in one of these boxes, they've chunked you. Okay, so if I said to you, imagine a lawyer. Have you got a picture in your head of what a lawyer looks like? Doctor? Accountant? Risk specialist? Okay. The challenge we've got now is people put other people in boxes to make life easier for us. We need to be able to get enough trust and rapport so we can jump between boxes and people allow us to. Okay, that takes a bit of time and effort up front, but it's a personal thing. If I can build trust with people, they are more easily able to hold these ideas in mind. Having a look up there, how many of you, and we'll do this quickly, how many of you are tactically strong? You're the people that when something is wrong and it's messy, you like to get thrown into the middle and you can create sense out of mess. Anyone? Awesome. Should see a few hands here. How many of you are the strategists? You want time. You don't want to be under pressure. You need to poke holes in lots of things, come up with different plans. Yes? How many of you didn't put your hand up or were like, ooh, is there a category for people like me who can do both? Yes, put your hand up. That is what you have to be. Like, we actually have to grow tactical capability. It can change in efficacy and focus. You can be a little more strategic and a little less tactical. But think about this on a very simple level. Okay, if you put a control in place that doesn't help you achieve strategy or outcome, what's the control there for? If we're managing risks that nobody thinks are relevant at all, internal and external, what's the outcome? If you're doing jobs, if you've got KPIs that are oppositional to what the organization wants to achieve, you're going to be pulling in the wrong direction. So at the very least, as an outcome for this, let's think ambidextrous and tactical. Let's get those two things going. And there's a little bit around ethics in here and sustainability. Just for your perspective, if you're doing stuff that isn't good for you, you're probably at some point not going to want to do it much longer, or you're not going to do it to the best of your ability. If it's not good for your team or for others, chances are it's not going to be sticky. Okay, and certainly if it's not good for your clients and your customers, people are not going to buy into what you're doing, so you'll have a negative outcome then. Is it good for the organization as a whole? We've seen now, we live in a world where one person's face, no matter how high or low up in the food chain, can have reputational impact to that organization. Don't just think you have to be at the top of the food chain to have an impact to the way people perceive it. And obviously, we'd like to try and make the world and our community a little bit better. So the shift from tactical is actually a shift into 4-layered thinking, where you can simultaneously tick all these things off. And if you're stuck, look at the should we test. Should we do it? You've got tools that your organization's already built to help you decide some of this stuff. It's not like we're starting from scratch. So to close off, I think the values help tremendously. And if you're not comfortable with the Westpac values, when I started doing a bit of homework after chatting to Amy and the team and looking at Are your values aligned to the outcomes? Are your outcomes aligned to your strategy? And is the brief I've been given aligned to those things? I was kind of relieved to go tick, tick, tick. Very often you see those things and they sit there and they are not practical. So I think your organization absolutely wants you to succeed. The question is whether you're going to be able to step up and meet it, and that's going to require a different skill set. From my side, thank you. It's always awesome to talk to people who get it. I will hang around after if there's any questions, but Amy and the team, thank you for the opportunity to chat to you all.